In further developments now, business leadership South Africa has slammed the 3-year 6% salary increase agreement between Transnet and workers' unions UNTU and SATAWU. BLSA has outlined that the deal is double the current inflation rate and is above estimates for the coming years. The organization has further indicated that the agreement shows a leadership failure, saying unions seem to be holding the country hostage with strike threats. These developments come after Moody's placed Transnet on review, warning that it would run out of money for operations and debt servicing within 3 months unless it gets a government bailout. The state has since approved a 51 billion rand guarantee facility for Transnet. That's to support its sustainability and long-term growth. BLSA CEO Busi Mavuso speaks to us now. Thank you so much for your time. What are the likely consequences of this agreement as you've highlighted in your initial statement?
Dumisang, good evening. I think this is quite unfortunate, and I think honestly, as much as I place a lot of blame on the leadership of Transnet, but I even place a bigger blame, Dumisang, on the unions. I really think that my biggest disquiet is really with the unions who are seemingly holding the country hostage with strike threats. Unions are showing complete disregard for the economic factors that affect us all. This is economic blackmail that we're experiencing here, and taxpayers are footing the bill while the economy suffers. It doesn't make sense to me, Sang, that Transnet or the unions would demand that Transnet gives double inflation increases in this environment where we know that Transnet cannot even afford to wipe its own nose. You rightfully point out the fact that they are currently looking for a lifeline. They are currently looking for state aid from National Treasury. This is an institution that has 100 billion debt. There is 100 billion debt redemptions that are payable over the next 5 years. You rightfully point out that Moody's and S&P have them on a credit watch for a downgrade due to their deteriorating liquidity and unsustainable capital structure. You also correctly point out that Moody's is actually saying that they are worried that their available liquidity at Transnet at the moment is only going to last them for the next 3 months. So on what basis, Dumisang, does an institution in that position commit to a 6% increase? Not only did they commit to a 6% increase, they are also committing that they are not going to retrench any workers. How do you guarantee job security in this volatile, uncertain, complex, ever-changing environment that we actually find ourselves in? I mean, when you look at what's happening in the private sector is not even giving 6% increases. They are giving cost of living adjustments, which are actually at about 3%, because inflation at the moment is 2.7%. So on what basis then does Transnet pay, or do unions demand, inflation plus 3? It doesn't make sense. Goodyear Tires at the moment has just retrenched about 900 workers after having had to shut down its 78-year-old plant. SAB is currently engaging with unions to try and lay off people. Mines across the country are retrenching thousands of people because they cannot get their output to markets. They cannot get their outputs to markets precisely because of Transnet's dysfunction. So the very same institution that is responsible for the economic demise that we're experiencing. When you listen to economists, they are saying that Transnet is currently costing us about R1 billion every day, thanks to its poor performance. So with this suboptimal performance, they go ahead and guarantee 6% increases. They go ahead and guarantee that they are not going to retrench any workers, while those companies that are affected by their suboptimal performance are having to retrench workers. It really just doesn't make sense. I really think that we're going to have to start having a serious conversation. The president has called for a national dialogue. Maybe, just maybe, to Misang, this national dialogue is really going to have to look at what is the role of the unions in this current economic climate, while all the other social partners are trying to work towards economic recovery, are trying to work towards trying to ensure that our economy turns the corner. what becomes the role of the unions? Because they cannot just sit continuing to make these demands on the economy that is currently struggling. So honestly, maybe part of the agenda of the national dialogue has to be what the role of the unions should be in this current economic climate.
An important point that you raised there about the role of unions in the current South African economy, but where then is the backbone of employers in this particular instance of that particular state-owned entity being Transnet, especially because the unions would argue that they are fighting for workers' rights?
But if they are fighting for workers' rights, it's not only Transnet that has blue-collar workers. Private sector has blue-collar workers that are currently getting 3% increases. So how do Transnet workers differ from those workers that are in the private sector? I mean, you've got people who work at ShopRite, who work at Pick n Pay, who are actually till operators. Surely the salaries that they earn are similar to those of blue collar, sometimes even lower, to Misang. Those shop operators, till operators at retailers are earning less than what Transnet workers are earning. So why do unions make as if the employees that they represent are actually secluded from what all of us as a country are currently experiencing? Because the issues that are affecting the country at the moment, I mean, you've got automobile industry, you've got Mercedes-Benz in the Eastern Cape who are actually saying that we've been experiencing challenges because of Transnet's dysfunction, and they are looking at possibly closing that plant. So do you want to tell me that Mercedes-Benz doesn't have the same blue-collar workers that Transnet has? So why do we have to then understand this seemingly special case of these union workers as if the rest of us are not actually living in the same economy and are actually affected by the very same issues that these Transnet workers are actually affected by? That's why I'm actually saying that let's not even try and understand this. This is economic blackmail, pure and simple. This is just the unions holding the country at ransom, and we're really going to have a discussion, to say what becomes their role, because honestly, they can't just sit there as principals that are actually marking the script of business and government in this country. They too have a role to play, because we are all trying to recover from the state capture project that affected the rest of the economy 10 years ago. And if we are all giving up something to Misang, what are the unions giving up?
Does this then not call for a moratorium, maybe that would come from a state structure that says SOEs at this current juncture should not be entering into these agreements that you rightfully criticize?
I'm sure those conversations in some corners have been held, but I really think that it's just the unions that are actually refusing to see reason, at the moment. That's why I don't even know, is it a function of a conversation? Is it a function of trying to commit them to something? And interestingly enough, BUSA did a study about 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, which actually says that the public servants in this country are paid way more than what you see other public servants being paid in other countries. And it's interesting because as much as they are being paid more, when you look at is their productivity, is their performance that is actually linked to this pay, there is none. The same 6% that Transnet has actually had to agree to, it doesn't come with any commitments from the unions. It doesn't come with any commitments from these workers to say that we are currently operating a port, that is actually dysfunctional. How do we actually ensure that with this 6% increase, we are going to get Transnet from operating at this level to operating at this level? So if this were performance-based or performance-linked, then probably maybe we would be having a different discussion to Misang, but it is not, because I'm sure, the unions are also refusing to have this discussion. So I really see this as unions engaging in bad faith. I really see them, really, accelerating the demise, and the dysfunction, of Transnet. They are really not helping at the moment. So if you have the public servants in this country earning more than what other countries are actually, while those countries even have higher productivity than what we have in South Africa for public servants, what is then the justification? So I don't buy, the case that the unions are actually making, that these are blue-collar workers who are actually struggling, who are not being paid enough, because the stats, the data, the research that has been conducted out there is actually, giving us a different set of facts.
Thank you for your contribution. BLSA CEO Busi Mavuso talking us through the criticism levelled over the above-inflation Transnet salary agreements.